Good evening. It is 7 p.m. in NYC. I'm Sam Kimball from Crush Wine Experiences, formerly New York Wine Events. Thank you so much for joining us on virtual day trip to wine country. We're here for small production craft wines from Long Island and from Western Massachusetts. That's right. Western Massachusetts. We're here for a special tasting with Montauk Daisy Winery, which is on Long Island, in the famed Long Island wine country, and Glendale Ridge Vineyards, which is a winery in Western Massachusetts. We've never, on this broadcast, ever been to a winery in that part of the country, in Western Mass. So I'm really excited to explore it. There are some really interesting aspects to the conversation we're going to jump into. For one, Western Massachusetts is a great area for hybrid grape growing. And when we talk about hybrid grapes, and we're going to talk about them a bit, we have to put that in context, because the evolution of wine in the US starts with vinifera, or European grapes like Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, etc. Well, Western Massachusetts is a great agricultural region. It has warmer summers, but much colder winters than some of the traditional wine regions like Long Island and California, which are very maritime in nature. So hybrid grapes that can manage extreme weather better are a focus in a region like Western Mass. And for example, tonight, and I can't wait to try it, I haven't even tasted it yet, we're going to try and taste a wine from a hybrid grape called Corot Noir. And we're going to learn all about that, and it's going to be super interesting. Our guest is going to shed more light on this topic of hybrid grapes versus traditional European grapes. But the question is vinifera, or European grape portfolio, is it sustainable going into the future, or are hybrids the future given climate change and other factors? We will find out, and we have just the person to talk to about it. So we'll be going to Long Island wine country, where vinifera European grapes have for 50 plus years been very successful. And yet hybrid grape growing has come into focus on Long Island as well. It's going to take a bit longer to really take off there, because the maritime climate on Long Island is particularly conducive to grape growing. It moderates the extreme temperatures of a very hot summer and a very cold winter that you would have up in a more mountainous and less maritime region. So that it'll be very interesting to talk about how that'll come into play there. And so very quickly, the stats are, for these two regions, there are 3 wineries in Western Massachusetts. It's early days. Watch this part of the country, watch this space. Long Island, as many of you may know, is a absolute hotbed of wine grape growing. There are 55 wineries plus on Long Island, approximately 52 on the North Fork and 3 on the South Fork. So I want to welcome everybody again. It's great to see you all. Please ask any questions or make comments in the chat, and we will answer those as we go on the fly. As I like to say, please interrupt us. We want the questions, we want the comments. And it is, if you would hit the chat right now, I see some people already have, and let us know where you're tuning in from. Where in the world, in the greater United States, are you based? I see New Jersey, I see Long Island, Durham, North Carolina. I love Durham, North Carolina. I used to live in Durham, North Carolina. Trumbull, wow, Florida. Jackie, oh my goodness. Wow. We're filling out the geography. Virginia, Holyoke, Mass. I love it. Miramar Beach, Freeport. Thank you guys for tuning in. It's great to see everyone. I see some folks that we've had on before, which is great, and I see some new faces too, which is also great. So welcome everybody. Let's take a look briefly before we bring on our very esteemed and august guest, let's bring on a couple of maps and just take a look at where we're headed. Ruben, Las Vegas. Welcome, Ruben. All right, so I'm gonna put up in my background here a map of Aquabog, New York, which is on Long Island. You can see it there. It's at the start of the North Fork. So you see that red map pin, that is right where the Long Island landmass forks. You see the South Fork, which is the Hamptons, and the North Fork, which is the storied wine country. And we're about 80 plus miles from New York City. You can see there on the other side of the map. And then if we go up to Western Mass, you can see here we are about roughly 2 hours west of Boston, straight due west from Boston across the state. And you can see the map pin there, and that shows you Glendale Ridge Vineyards. Absolutely beautiful, both places. We'll see some great photos, and in fact, the background that I have up right now is of Glendale, so a vineyard up there in Western Massachusetts at the Glendale Ridge Vineyards. So without further ado, I want to bring on our special guest. He is the winemaker at both Montauk Daisy and Glendale Ridge Vineyard, Juan Martinez, a good friend of mine, somebody I've known for a number of years, and an amazing winemaker. Juan, welcome to this broadcast, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Sam. Pleasure to be here tonight.
Well, it's an honor to have you on. I have been a huge fan of the wines you make for quite a few years, and I haven't actually tried any of these. This will be first blush, so I'm excited about it. Where does this broadcast find you?
So I am right in Riverhead, New York. I live right in downtown Riverhead with my wife and young son, and so that's where I am this evening. Yeah.
And Riverhead is right where the fork splits, right?
Right where the fork splits. So we're kind of equidistant, from any of the great places to travel to on the North and South Fork.
Let's talk a little bit about Montauk Daisy. I promised everybody we would touch on this. So how did you end up coming up with the name Montauk Daisy?
So it's kind of a little bit of a long story, but it started back in my days when I was the winemaker at Martha Clara Vineyards, which was owned by the Entenmann family for Entenmann's Cakes, which actually one of the founders, one of the brothers, just passed away recently. The last of the three brothers that really brought the bakery into its prominence. But I worked with Robert Entenmann. And before they had actually started the vineyard, they had started off by raising thoroughbred racehorses, which they had several of them on the farm that stayed through their retirement years. But one in particular was Montauk Daisy. And that particular horse, there was actually a photo in our private wine tasting room that whenever I would go up into the private wine tasting room, I'd always see this photo. And back in my mind, I was like, oh, that'd be an interesting wine name, knowing that being here from Long Island, Montauk, which a lot of people would make the connection between the Montauk Daisy and Montauk. But lo and behold, if you actually research it, the Montauk Daisy is not native to Long Island at all. It's actually native to Japan, which would end up becoming an interesting part of the story because as we've kind of gone, my wife and I, who were both in the wine industry, after many years decided that, it was time to maybe try it for ourselves, to make our own wine. And when we did, we started working with Mineo Shimura and Teresa Dilworth, who actually own Comtesse Therese Vineyard. And, Mineo Shimura is from Japan. And Teresa, his wife, is half Japanese. So, there was already this kind of interesting, coincidence that had occurred. But additionally, one of the things that we like most about the Montauk Daisy is that throughout the growing season, it is really one of the last, if not the last, flowers that come to bloom, and they come to bloom during the peak of harvest. So it was just all these different dots ended up getting connected, which is how we ended up moving forward with the name Montauk Daisy.
Got it. And as it turns out, the owner of the vineyard hails from Japan.
Correct. Yeah. So there's all these, and we kind of, one of the things that we like to kind of say is that, look, grapevines, Vitus Vinifera grapevines are, come from Europe. The ones that we have planted there, I myself originally hail from Mexico, my wife originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. So we're all these kind of transplants that have just kind of landed here on Long Island. And it just is an interesting connection for all of these different coincidental type things that have occurred. So we just thought it would be a neat name. And once again, being here on Long Island, sometimes people make the incorrect inference that we're referring to Montauk, but we're not referring to Montauk. We're referring to Montauk Daisy, the shrub.
And this is Mineo.
That is, yes.
Originally from Japan, and it just so happens the Montauk daisies, which were started there and now grow on Long Island. So it's quite a circle. It's quite a full circle. It
is, and even another interesting part of everything is that Mineo was educated at MIT in Massachusetts. So it's just all these different coincidental connections that have evolved or have kind of we've realized through everything.
Very interesting. So for Montauk Daisy, what is the distinctive kind of aspect or feature of the winery? How do you position it and your wines in the marketplace? What's your strategy and philosophy?
I guess that's one of the things you're always trying to do, is to differentiate yourself in the wine industry. But we have a built-in difference from a lot of the other vineyards in that when Teresa and Mineo decided to plant the vineyard, there's different ways, methods that you can plant the vineyard. Meaning how wide you make there's so many decisions in planting vineyards and making wine, but one of the primary ones is how wide you want to make the rows. And more typically, when you go to Europe, you'll find that they utilize a lot of meter by meter. So meaning rows are 1 meter wide and there's 1 meter in between vines. So if you were to come visit Long Island or just drive around the vineyards of Long Island, one of the things you'll notice is there's a pretty typical row width of about 7 feet. That's kind of the generally planted width of vine rows. And then you'll see anywhere between 4 and 5 vines, 4 and 5 feet per vine. So 7 foot wide, and then about 4 to 5 feet per vine difference. At Montauk Daisy, or at the Comtesse Therese vineyard, where Montauk Daisy sources its fruit, the vineyard is about a little bit more than 1 meter wide, probably more along the lines of 4 feet. And you also have about 3 to 4 feet between each vine. So what does that mean? That means that we have a lot more vines per acre, ranging around 2,100 vines per acre. That's my son and his friend Sutton going through the vineyard, and you can get a sense of the distance from each vine as well as the rows.
Yeah, those rows are quite narrow.
They are quite narrow, and so much so that it is really challenging to find equipment to go down those rows. So a lot of the work at the Comtesse Therese vineyard is done by hand. We'll de-leaf entirely by hand. We'll do the hedging entirely by hand. Most of the vineyard all the pruning is certainly, done by hand. But again, those tight rows make mechanization, a real challenge. So most of everything that's done there is by hand. So how are we different? We have super, high density in our vineyard, planted more to that European style of meter by meter planting, as well as just really, being handcrafted, because each vine, a lot of the things that have to be done are done by hand.
And then we have another picture of Mineo here. And this
Yeah,
is at the production facility, yeah.
Yeah, this is at Premium Wine Group where the Montauk Daisy wines are made, and what you're actually seeing there is Mineo leaning. So all the fruit is hand picked, so there's no machine picking at the Comtesse Therese Vineyard. And when it's hand picked into these bins. They're half ton. Each one is probably holding roughly about a half of a ton of fruit in it. And so 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, there's probably between 3.75 and 4 tons of fruit sitting in those bins right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's impressive. And that's all Cab Franc?
That would, from the distance, I'm thinking that was the Cabernet Sauvignon.
Got it.
And it's a little, yeah, it's probably, I would think that's the Cab Sauv.
Excellent. And is there anything about the hands processing of the grapes and harvesting and just the general handling of the fruit that changes or positively affects how the wine tastes and and the quality?
It's, again, I think it's going back to that whole idea. I mean, things that are mass produced, mechanized, I mean, it's, and don't get me wrong, you can make some really nice wines from utilizing some of the other techniques, but this really beckons back to a simpler time. Where things were done more by hand, were more artisanal, versus, just mechanization, which speeds everything up without a doubt. But, again, there's downsides to some of those things as well, too. So, again, it's a different passion. It's a different, kind of look. Mineo is more, the French have a term, I don't really consider him as much a vineyard manager as kind of what is the more typical kind of way of describing somebody who manages a vineyard. But in France, they call them vignerons. And Mineo is more of a vigneron. He's out there, doing what he does, but he has a passion and a true love, for wine and that vineyard and tending to the vines and just a true love of nature. If anybody follows Mineo on Facebook, if you can look for Mineo Shimura on Facebook, he's always posting photos of the different birds and the hawks. I mean, he loves the entire environment and really embraces it. So much of the fact that even on the farm, Teresa keeps bees. So there's just a real reverence, and respect for nature and the whole growing process that I think was what you want in someone who's tending to the vines that eventually you're going to make wine from.
And they also, do they grow other stuff? I mean, I see here these strawberries, with
Those are not,
wines.
those were not from the vineyard. That was there was a little care package that I had put together from somebody. Those are North Fork strawberries, which are pretty darn tasty. But no, that is not grown there currently. We are talking about planting some wildflower areas, a lot of milkweed. I know Teresa's has a lot of plans for things to be planted on the farm actually this year. Again, trying to encourage help the monarch butterflies. And so, there are a number of things that will be planting this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to remember that it's all one ecosystem and that all the different flora and fauna that are in the environment benefit the growing of the grapes. It's not just that the grapes just grow and nothing else happens. There's all this other stuff going on.
Absolutely.
Obviously in nature and in the ecosystem. Let's talk Glendale Ridge briefly. When was it founded?
So Glendale Ridge, the vines were planted mainly between 2010 and 2014. The actual first year I believe they opened was 2017 is when they first started opening up. And so, but I've been involved there with them since late 2018.
And here you can see, wow, what a different landscape. I mean, Long Island's so flat. And hills.
I love it up there. So that's the winery is positioned behind me. This was actually on my recent trip up there. It's probably about a week and a half ago now. But what we're looking at in the distance is Mount Tom. And this is what they call the Pioneer Valley. So it's like part of the Connecticut River Valley. And, you know, as I kind of start to look more into the history and the geology, much like Long Island, it was really, that whole valley was carved away and formed by glaciers as they came through, you know, at different ice age, glacial advances and retreats. That whole area was carved. But it really is such a, you know, I love Long Island, don't get me wrong, you know, but you can't really get those big vista views on Long Island unless you're by the beach, by the seashore. That's when you can kind of get a better view of everything. But there, it's, no matter what the time of year it is, it's always just this breathtaking view of the valley and the Mount Tom in front of you.
So let's talk a little bit about hybrid grapes. I talked about that at the beginning. You're an expert in it. I am not, but I'm fascinated at how they can start to shape the way that grapes are grown for wine, and also how, you know, new wine styles and selections are developed with hybrid grapes.
Sure. So I'm going to kind of take it back a little bit further, you know, so just to talk about Vitus Vinifera. So Vitus Vinifera is the genus species from which, you know, most wines that people can name, you know, come from. You know, most people would know Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah, Riesling, all of these kind of names of grapes, types of wines that come to the mind first and foremost are more than likely Vitis Vinifera. That's what people know. However, you know,
and those are the traditional European grapes.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, and so, you know, through the years, people have had desire or reasons to want to try to differentiate, you know, those varietals and try, and there's thousands of grape varieties in the world, and people have kind of crossed different types of genus and species, you know, to try and come up with new varieties. And, you know, one of the main reasons, I mean, a lot of this stuff had actually started in France. Many years ago, they were probably some of the original ones that started playing around with this, but mainly because there was some environmental issue that maybe was being faced. And so I know in France in particular, they dealt with phylloxera, which is a little ground louse that, you know, originated from our soils when people were going across the Atlantic and bringing things, vines and plants across back and forth. Well, one of the things that the early Europeans brought from America over to Europe was phylloxera. They brought it in the soil, and the grapevines here on the United States side, or the Americas side, well, they evolved with phylloxera. So native grape varieties here in the United States have a natural resistance to phylloxera. They evolved together. So now you took phylloxera, you know, from the States over to Europe. Well, it got into those vineyards and it ravaged the vineyards. There's a great book called the Vintner and the Botanist for anybody that's interested in reading some more about this. And so what happened was, you know, people were trying to figure out, you know, what was happening. And so people started playing around with hybrids, and, you know, and so it was kind of happening already. Fast forward to more modern days here, you know, in the United States, well, you know, grapevines sometimes struggle, they will struggle in extreme cold. So one of the main reasons that people have played around the most with hybrids and trying to come up with new cultivars is to have kind of resistance or cold hardiness, as we call it. And I just want to be very clear that that what we're talking about with hybrids are not GMOs. These are not genetically modified. These are plants that have basically had pollen from one plant, the flower from the other, and you cross the two together, and then eventually the fruit and the seeds that they develop can be planted and can create, you know, it's a mixture, a natural mixing of genetic material to come up, just like us, right? Our mothers, our fathers mixed genetic material. Here we are. So, we're all kind of hybrids to a certain extent. We are not genetically modified. This was not, people doing things in the lab. So in Massachusetts, which has a slightly colder climate, one of the things that they do tend to grow a lot of are hybrids. And coming from Long Island, mainly working with vinifera, because there's really little I don't even know that there's any hybrids left here on Long Island. They were in the early days, but the preference was to go towards the European varietals. And in Massachusetts, they grow hybrids. So one of the things that I was most excited about working up there was to work with some hybrids, and mainly because, as I've described this before, as an artist, as a winemaker, as an artist, you have colors on your palette. And Long Island has its vinifera colors, it's what's here. But when I go to Massachusetts, there's a different set of colors, a different palette with hybrids. And I can honestly say that I've been quite impressed with the quality that hybrids can make, the quality of wine that the hybrids can make. But one of the things that I find most intriguing about is the sustainability of hybrids, that they do require less inputs, from the vineyard managers, or, it just require less attention. And so, not that I want to say that
they require less there's occasionally a little bit of spraying for pests or insects. Less of that. They're natural, resistant, and they're also hardy. They're hardier,
yes,
and they require less intervention, which in some ways, not to vulgarly simplify the whole thing, but it makes it more natural because they're just thriving in this environment, in our North American environment, especially on continental, like Western Mass.
Yeah.
And I think that when you talk about sustainability, you're talking about environmentally sensitive and sound practices and philosophy, and living in the world that we are. That's important, that, with all that's going on, climate change and the rest.
Absolutely. So I think that's kind of one of the, I mean, look, I've been super impressed with the wine quality that can come from hybrids. I'm excited to keep on, going down that rabbit hole, and excited to see, I mean, as we talk, there are programs right now at Cornell and in Minnesota where they're continuing to, and this is very slow work. Hybridization is very slow work because you have to actually go through growing seasons, numerous growing seasons, and then, identify a vine that might be slightly different and then replicate that vine. So then they'll start taking cuttings and they'll make clones of that. And so it takes years and years and years for this to occur. But I will go out on the ledge and say that I think it's something, as we start to look at sustainability more and kind of what we're going to leave behind for future generations, that I think hybrids should undoubtedly be part of the conversation.
Now, it's super interesting. We have not touched on that before, and frankly, it's something that I'm delighted to talk about tonight. So let's get into the wines. I was so interested in the hybrid stuff, I almost forgot to. Let's start tasting.
Yeah.
We're going to start with Montauk Daisy.
Yep.
And Montauk Daisy, we're going to taste the Chardonnay 2019 and the 2019 red wine blend. So we'll start with the Chardonnay.
Okay, I think we've got the 2020 Chardonnay, Sam. I think I had given you the 2020.
Oh, is it 2020? My bad. Okay.
2020 Chard, 2019 red. Yep.
Got it. Okay. So let me, while you start talking about the provenance of this Chardonnay, I'm going to get a picture of it up on screen.
Excellent.
And let's dive in.
Great. So this is 100% Chardonnay. And in 2019, it was mainly all stainless steel fermented. My wife was in the wine industry for a very long time. She's now in land conservation, but she is a certified sommelier. So has very strong opinions about wine. So we often will talk and discuss with wines. Discuss wines, but in 2019 I made it all stainless steel. In 2020 I did a little bit of mixing. I did about 60% stainless steel and 40% barrel fermented. So this is a blend of stainless steel and barrel fermented wine. And for those that maybe are a little bit newer, stainless steel is a neutral environment. So when you put juice, grape juice, and then yeast, ferment it, because it's a neutral environment, it will not impart any flavors. The environment will not impart any flavor at all. Whereas barrel fermented, you will get some nuance from the barrel. We do use older, more neutral oak barrels, so barrels that have been utilized for many years. I actually bought some used white wine barrels for the production, and they will impart subtle flavors. One of the things that I like more about barrel fermented over stainless steel fermented is that you get more development of mouthfeel when a wine ferments in barrel. And in addition to fermenting in barrel, they're also aged. We have a term called sur lie. It's a French term. Obviously a lot of terminology in winemaking does reference back to the French techniques, but sur lie, SUR space LIE, is when you allow the wine to age with the yeast that are now no longer, they've finished fermentation, so they're all consuming the sugar, eating alcohol and CO2, and then they settle to the bottom. And so we age with that on the bottom of the tank, and we stir it up. And over time, those yeast begin to break down. And as they break down, they release compounds into the wine that'll give it some richness. So I balance and blend the maybe leaner stainless steel fermented with that bit of barrel fermented to create something that has a little bit more texture on the palate, but yet still has the fruit forward, the kind of flavors that you would get from stainless steel.
This is delicious. It's a balanced Chardonnay. I love the combination of the stainless steel fermented and the oak barrel contact and the sur lie. You get that softening, but it's really a beautiful wine. I'm pairing it with soft cheese. I went with Camembert instead of Brie.
Perfect.
And it's delicious. By the way, did anybody hit the chat if anybody got the Montauk Daisy wines ahead of the tasting? They were available with the promo code. But man, this is so balanced. It's just a lovely, lovely wine, and it's super food friendly.
Absolutely. It's like I had said, it's 100% Chardonnay, so which is Vitus Vinifera. So again, here on Long Island, I would love to see some planted. I'd love for us at CTV to plant. We have talked about some different things there as well. But long term, it's definitely something that I'd like to see. But I love vinifera as well. I can't say that I don't. I think they should always kind of remain part of what is happening. But I think we definitely need to talk about some diversification. But I still love vinifera. I cannot, and I've traveled around the world visiting wine regions in France, and I have so much respect, for it. But I'm just excited to try different things.
I want to raise a glass to Steve, who got the Montauk Daisy wines ahead of the tasting.
Yeah,
cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Yeah.
But by the way, Juan, I've never told you this, but all the years we've worked together, and when you were at Martha Clara, I used to bring some of our wine tour groups. For anybody watching, Juan makes amazing Chardonnay. And I would always get a bottle of the Chardonnay when we came with one of our tour groups, and I'd grab a bottle to take home, and I would pair it with a white clam pizza that same night. And it was just magic, because the white clam pizza with a little butter and garlic is a little heavier. So you want a little bit more oomph in your white wine. Man, it was good.
Cool.
Almost every time I picked up a bottle up at the tasting room and to take home. So
cool. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's move on to the Montauk Daisy 2019 red wine.
Yep.
By the way, what's the price point of the Chardonnay we just tasted?
Chardonnay is $22 retail, and the red wine is $38 retail.
Okay, got it. All right, so let's talk about the red wine. It's a blend. What are the grapes that go into this one?
So this is mainly Merlot. It's about 50% Merlot. I think about 40% Cabernet Sauvignon, both from the CTV vineyard, the Comtesse Therese vineyard. I call it CTV. There's a little bit of Cabernet Franc that I actually purchased. So at the CTV vineyard, we have 4 different varietals planted. We have Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, and Sauvignon Blanc. And with that, the Sauvignon Blanc, we actually sell to a gentleman who I've known forever in the wine industry, was actually the first person to hire me into the wine industry. His name's John Leo, who makes his own wines, and for Clovis Point and a couple Anabe vineyards on the North Fork. And I mentioned John because we sell him the Sauvignon Blanc, but I also purchased a little bit of Cabernet Franc, about 10%, to go into this blend. And so what's interesting about this is that all 3 of those varietals were basically picked in a 48-hour period. And so what I allow to happen is I allow the Merlot to get to an overripe point, and I leave it in the vineyard until the Cabernet Sauvignon is ready. And when the Cab Sauv is ready, we pick both of them at the same time. We did this in 2019. We did this in 2020. And then John's, the Anabe Cab Franc came in on that following day as well. The Merlot got picked first, Cabernet Sauvignon, and that Cabernet Franc got picked on the following day. And so what happens is everybody, all 3 varietals end up in the tank together. And so we co-ferment this, and I do that. You could do things different ways. You could ferment your Merlot in one tank. You can ferment your Cabernet Sauvignon in another, and your Cab Franc in a different one, and go through individual fermentations. And then blend them. At whatever point you wanted to. I decided to blend it. Right from the vineyard, go into the tank, and I just think you get better integration of the flavors, of the tannins, and so this is a co-fermented red blend that's aged in oak as well. That's aged, I believe this was about 11 months.
And what percentage is Merlot again?
It's about 50% Merlot, 40% Cabernet Sauvignon, and I think it was about 10% Cab Franc.
It's very smooth. It's a really nice, easy drinking, medium-bodied red wine. I'm getting some red fruits on the nose. Just great. I paired it with Manchego cheese,
beautiful,
and which it went great. And I was gonna get the truffle mousse pate, but my store didn't have that today, so I got Manchego instead to go with.
Okay, all right, dynamite. Both would go very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this one is, you said is $38?
$38. Yeah. And this is a wine. And I'll talk briefly about closures. The Montauk Daisy Chardonnay is on a screw cap. The red wine is on cork, but it's what we call a DM cork. Let's see if I can find it here. It's made from natural cork, but it's like kind of a conglomerate. These corks are there's no failure at all. You're never going to open up a corked wine, with a DM. I was a big proponent of screw caps in the early days, and I still think screw caps are great. But I know consumers love, after many, many years of kind of trying to sell screw caps to folks, because at Martha Clara, we went entirely to screw cap as of 2007. We were the first winery on Long Island to go entirely over to screw caps. Some others had screw caps and split their production. We went entirely over to them. So I'm a big screw cap fan, but with DM, this conglomerate cork, it's made from natural cork that has been treated to remove TCA. It's that's the compound that might make the wine smell a little bit off. And so it's guaranteed to have no TCA. And with this product on the market now. And I know how many people love the romance of removing the cork. I always used to have the joke with people that if you need a cork for romance, you're doing something wrong. But I am proud to say, I look, I get it. I get the, the ritual of pulling it out of the cork. So I did put our red wines under cork with DM cork.
This one is delicious. I would be remiss if I did not put up on the screen. I think there's a very cool picture of this wine, and a quite a nice pairing. Yeah, here it is. Hold on one second. Let me put this up on screen. I love this shot. This is a delicious pairing shot. Here it is, Montauk Daisy red wine blend, which is absolutely delicious. Nice medium-bodied wine with a pepperoni pizza.
Yeah, that's a homemade pizza that we made, that I like to make here. Yeah. It pairs well. I can say that. It certainly paired well that night.
You know what's nice? So Susan had a question. What's the alcohol level on these two Montauk Daisy wines?
Good question. I have to refer to the label. 12% on the Chardonnay, and I think it's 13% on the red. Yep, and 13% on the red.
So it's an easy drinking red. This is not like a 15.5% alcohol volume like Zinfandel from California, which I love, but you got to pace yourself with those.
Yes, that's right. No, that's one of the things that I do like a lot about Long Island and East Coast, especially East Coast, but certainly on Long Island and the Finger Lakes, as well too, Massachusetts, is that our wines are not, you look, with climate change, a lot of these traditionally warmer climate regions are struggling because, their already warm climate is getting warmer, and so the grapes are developing more sugar, higher alcohol. How do you deal with these things? We're blessed here on the East Coast that we do have some cooler climates, so our wines retain acidity. So there's like a freshness on the palate with them. So that's one of the things that I do love about things here on the East Coast.
Absolutely.
I see a question as well too, Sam, real quick. Do you still get micro-oxygenation with these corks? So yes, so one of the things we call it in the wine industry, we call it oxygen transfer rate, OTR. And so one of the things that I loved about screw caps was it eliminated TCA, but you also had a consistent oxygen transfer rate, OTR. With screw caps. DM, natural cork, you had TCA and you had variable oxygen transfer rates. With DM, with these types of corks, you've eliminated TCA and you have consistent oxygen transfer rate. So these wines will undoubtedly age the way that I had hoped they would when they were put into the bottle. So yes, they age just as well.
Would you lay down this red blend for how many years before it's like, okay, drink it?
I mean, I'm always more conservative on how long that I say wines will age, but I think this is easily 10 to 15 years, no problem. I think it will last as long as anybody can keep from drinking it.
Well, based on what I just tasted, I love it. And I wouldn't say harshly critical, but I take a very analytical eye to the red wines from Long Island. And I love this one because it was so balanced and smooth.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to go in the lightning round. We have 12 minutes left, Juan. No pressure. Yep. Let's talk Glendale Ridge. We're going to start with the Corot Noir. This is drum roll, please. This is the hybrid grape. We're going to start with the pét-nat. Okay, fine.
Yeah,
we'll start with the pét-nat. I mean, this came out of the bottle. It was like all that effervescence and the bubbles. It's just fantastic. So for those of us, for the neophytes among us, and I include myself, tell us what is pét-nat? What is pét-nat natural?
Yeah, so there's different ways of producing sparkling wines. The one that people probably most likely know is method traditional, method champenois, which is the champagne method, which is now called method traditional. And that is where yeast go into the bottle, they ferment the wine, and then eventually you remove, there's a process in which we remove the yeast, put a cork in the bottle. Pét-nat's similar, but a little bit different. What we do with pét-nat is we put the yeast in the bottle with a little bit of sugar, the wine, a little bit of sugar. They ferment it, but rather than removing the yeast as they do in method traditional or method champenois, we actually leave it in the bottle. And we call it pétillant natural, or it's also known as the ancestral method. And it's probably the way people drank sparkling wine before the traditional method was developed. There would have been some yeast sedimentation at the bottom of the bottle. If you have this pét-nat, or if you've had other pét-nats, but this is a pét-nat of Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon from the CTV Vineyard. And it comes from us. We ship it up to Glendale. We squeeze it here on the island. They take it as juice. We ferment it on site up there, and then bottle it, and it re-ferments, in the bottle. And that's what the pétillant natural is. So it has a little bit of effervescence, not a little, I mean, it has probably 4 or 5, what we say, atmospheres. So it has a nice effervescence on the palate, very fresh. A lot of fresh strawberry, like watermelon-rind, on this wine. It's a personal favorite of ours around the house for sure.
This is so good. It's like alcoholic strawberry soda.
Yeah. All right.
And I mean, and with the soft cheese, great. With the cream cheese, I did not fully or properly cook my escargot tonight, so I was gonna have it with a little escargot, but I'm gonna have to save that for later because I have to cook them some more.
Okay.
But I mean, wow, and it's sort of semi-dry. I mean, it's got some sweetness.
Yep. Yeah, with pétillant natural, like what you do is the yeast are consuming all the sugars, taking it to dryness. With method traditional, method champenois, what they're doing is they remove the yeast, but they also add a little bit of sweetened wine back in, what they call dosage, which brings it back up in sweetness. So that is not happening here. So it's dry, it's refreshing, beautiful in the summertime, favorite of mine. We here at the house, we love it on a Sunday afternoon with bagels, cream cheese, and lox. Pairs dynamite as well, but escargot would be a great pairing too.
I mean, congratulations. This one is a winner. I mean, they're all great, but this one, it just knocks your sock off because it's so distinctive and different from what we normally drink. Terrific, absolutely terrific. All right, so I am so excited. I haven't tasted, I've been disciplined. I have not tried the Corot Noir, but we're gonna go to the Corot Noir next. Before we do, if you want the pét-nat, you got to go up to the winery at Glendale Ridge Vineyard. How much is a bottle of pét-nat there?
Oh, geez, I don't have that off the top of my head. I think it's about $28. Alex, if you're watching, if you could put that up in the chat, that'd be awesome.
Alex, we see he's watching. So Alex, put that in the chat.
Give a shout out to Alex. He's the on-site winemaker there. Great guy, young guy, pleasure to work with. Also give a shout out to Mary and Ed Hamill, the owners of Glendale, who allow us to be the artists that we are. It's really a pleasure. And if you haven't been up there, please get up there and mention this, and I'm sure they'll take care of you for sure.
It's God's country. I'm from nearby, down just across the New York border in Dutchess County, which is right up at the edge of Massachusetts and Connecticut and New York, all kind of converge. It's at the foothills of the Berkshires, absolutely beautiful. And it's $26, Alex says, for the rosé pét-nat. So, wow, that's a great one. Now, because we do have people watching from various parts of the country, Juan, and maybe Alex can advise on this. When will people be able to order it from the Glenridge Vineyard website?
I don't know. I don't know that we've looked too into the interstate shipping laws are pretty atrocious and very
Byzantine.
outdated. But it's something I can always talk to Alex. I'm sorry, Mary and Ed about as well too.
Yep. Okay, very good. All right, so drum roll, please. The moment we've all been waiting for, the hybrid grape, Corot Noir. I just swirled it and sniffed it. Oh my goodness, it's got a big bouquet. It's
delicious. One of the, again, kind of always referencing is for comparisons back to France in particular. If you happen to like Beaujolais wines, which is made from the Gamay grape, this is very reminiscent to me of cru level Beaujolais. The Morgon, the Moulin Vent, it has that type of flavor profile, which are, to me, almost just as good as great Burgundies, but this wine is stunning, and it's a wine that requires a lot less inputs in the vineyard. It's really, to me, it just shows in the early days of hybrids, sometimes they crossed things with native grape varieties that had what they sometimes described as a foxy character. So a lot of the hybridization work that has been done to try and remove that, and so this wine has none of that. If you gave this to, the average trained wine person and kind of said, what varietal do you think it is? They would struggle. They would struggle saying that it would be, again, Beaujolais would probably come to people's mind.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, it's really delicious, but it doesn't taste like anything you normally sort of. It's not like a Merlot. I see the Beaujolais connection, but it's got its own jam. This Corot Noir.
It does. It's got. I love the color. It's very inky, and it's harvested relatively early. I believe it's like late September is typically when we're seeing, mid-late September, which is pretty early for red varietals, especially vinifera. Vinifera, maybe you get some Pinot Noir coming in mid-late September, more like late September, but Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, they're mid-October, late October, early November, so you can and you think about living here on the East Coast, how we deal with all these coastal storms that move up, it's whenever you whenever you can get stuff into the winery, it's for the most part safe. And so what's one of the other reasons that I love these hybrids as well too, is that they do come in a bit earlier. And so you're able to pick things before the risk of the weather starts to take control.
Is this a Glendale shot?
No, that's also at premium as well too.
It's premium, okay.
Yeah. I definitely encourage people, if you live on Long Island, or you just take the ferry across either from Bridgeport or or Orient Point, from Port Jeff to Bridgeport or Orient Point to New London, and it's about an hour and a half away from there. For those maybe you're familiar with Northampton, Massachusetts, it's just south of them. It's actually in Southampton, Mass, and it's a little bit north of Springfield. It really is a beautiful part of the East Coast, and I highly recommend checking it out sometime.
Juan knows a lot about wine, but doesn't come across as a wine snob. Entertaining and informative, Juan.
Thank you.
I couldn't have said it better, Susan. We have a couple of questions, and we have some really smart, knowledgeable wine people on tonight. What vinifera percentage or parentage does this hybrid Corot Noir trace to? That's from Bruce.
So this I will admit that I had to look up in preparation for this. It was not something that I remember. One of the things that I was very pleased to see is that it was actually developed at Cornell University, so right here in New York State. But it's a cross between Sèvres, Viard, and Steuben. And I can put that in here. I don't know much about the parents, so just put that, it should be Sèvres, not serve.
S-E-V-E, yeah. Oh, SYV.
Yes,
Yep.
Vineyard and Steuben. I don't know anything about its parents. I am kind of curious. I'm actually going to be, going to some seminars in the next month or so. And one of the things that they'll be talking about is hybrids. I want to continue to go down the rabbit hole and learn more and just expand. Again, that's one of the things I love about being in the wine industry is that you can never know everything. It's just, and if anybody tells you they know everything, they're a little crazy. Don't listen to them. You can never know everything about the wine industry.
Are you going to be attending Bev New York?
I was not planning on it, but I know you had mentioned you were involved with it.
It's virtual.
Yeah.
It's going to be virtual.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's definitely going to be some viticulture sessions and enology that are really interesting. You know what's interesting about this Corot Noir? It really works in the glass. Like the more time it's spending in the glass, it's just evolving. You know?
It's a beautiful wine. It's a beautiful wine. And one of the things, yes, good resistance. Yes. There's a question from Bruce. Yes, it does evolve in the glass. I don't know how long this one will age. I'm kind of new to Corot Noir, but I'm excited to see. I mean, easily I'd say 7 to 10 years. I do believe it'll go beyond that, but being that this is, I've only worked with it for a few vintages now, but it's the one varietal that I find most exciting. Up at Glendale, they also have Traminette planted, which is another hybrid. Vidal. We do have some Cabernet Franc planted up there as well too. It's one of Ed Hamill's favorites is his Cab Franc. He takes so much pride in it. We've made some really nice wines with it through the years as well too. And they have a couple of other things, a Tasca, which is a hybrid, Aramella hybrid, and Noire, which is a hybrid. So we're looking at all these things and seeing how they come out and evolve. So we're very excited.
Well, it's super interesting stuff, and I can't wait to taste more of these hybrids. I think that there's a lot of promise, especially as we kind of go through the evolution of climate change, et cetera. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Join us next week. We are doing a German wine and food pairing with a real Berliner Turkish-German gentleman by the name of Erkan Emre, who's got an incredible portfolio of German-inspired restaurants in New York City and Brooklyn. And we're going to taste some terrific wines and pair them with some great German food. So join us next week. We'll be on Wednesday, the 16th at 7 p.m. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. And Juan, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It's been my pleasure as well.
Excellent. We will see you soon. Stay safe, everybody.
Cheers.
Okay.